The Black Panther controversy is absolutely infuriating. The Black Panther game. Apparently a bold, ambitious, story-driven adventure helmed by EA. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, it's not like Electronic Arts has a history of smothering creativity with a pillow the moment it shows signs of individuality. Oh, wait. Yes, dear viewer, in the last few years, someone at EA thought, what if we made a game that wasn't a half-baked live service riddled with microtransactions and a seasonal pass filler? And then, just as quickly, someone else asked, but how will we monetize player loyalty and ruin replayability in the name of quarterly growth? And poof, just like that, the Black Panther game vanished. Because heaven forbid EA ship a game where you can't dress T'Challa in a neon pink Battle Pass skin and watch him floss. So with that said, let's talk about the Black Panther game that almost was. The one that dared to be different, and why in the world of modern AAA publishing, that is practically a death sentence. I am Lady Decade. If you like spicy gaming content, then hit subscribe, as this is the story of the recently cancelled Black Panther game. Gaming over the past year, particularly from the world of AAA publishers, has been, let's face it, an absolute circus of incompetence. From Concord, the most expensive flop in entertainment history, to EA's own creatively bankrupt Dragon Age: The Veilguard, it's been less of a golden age of gaming and more of a gold-plated sewage pipe. But, as is often the case, even in the filth, something beautiful can bloom. Because while EA happily sneers at their own audience, referring to RPG fans as cave-dwelling nerds, some developers actually still respect the people buying their games. Enter Expedition 33, a brilliant turn-based RPG crafted by a small, talented team that somehow managed to outshine the billion-dollar sludge the big boys have been shoveling. Use my link below to grab 43% off this potential Game of the Year contender, and if you're in a shopping mood, there's up to 90% off of thousands of other indie gems and classic hits as well, because honestly, why pay AAA prices for corporate slop when you can get actual quality for a fraction of the cost? So, happy shopping, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. Imagine this, a single-player Black Panther game, big budget, fully narrative driven, set after T'Challa's death in a Wakanda teetering on the edge of a civil and cosmic upheaval. You weren't just going to punch bad guys, you were going to fight for the throne, navigate tribal politics, build alliances, rival your own family, uncover Skrull infiltrators disguised as your closest advisors, and at the centre of it all, a next-generation revival of the Nemesis system. Yes, that Nemesis system. The dynamic AI framework from Shadow of Mordor that revolutionised reactive storytelling a decade ago. Cliffhanger Games, helmed by the former head of Monolith Productions, was bringing it back, and this time it wasn't just enemies who remembered you, it was the entire world. The project arguably had everything: Marvel backing, a crack team of veteran developers, cutting-edge AI systems, and a Wakandan setting built to reflect legacy, power, and consequence. And then, as if summoned by the gods of corporate mediocrity, EA cancelled it. Cliffhanger Games shut down, the game scrapped, the dream thrown on a pile of what-ifs, not because it was failing, not because it lacked ambition, but because in 2025 making something original is often more dangerous than making something bad. Cliffhanger Games wasn't just another branch on EA's bloated tree, it was created to make this game, a new AAA studio based in Seattle led by Kevin Stevens. You know, the Nemesis system guy. The team he built read like a Marvel vs Capcom roster of top-tier development talent. People from Halo Infinite, God of War, Call of Duty, and yes, Monolith's finest. This wasn't a shovelware tie-in. This was a game where it seemed like EA were actually trying to make something meaningful, even if ultimately it was never to be. Reportedly, the game would have dropped players into a Wakanda without a ruler, and you'd get to choose one of several protagonists, including T'Challa, Shuri or Killmonger, and the others would become dynamic NPCs, each shaped by your choices. So things appeared to be shaping up nicely. Thematically, it was said to be about legacy, earning the right to wear the mantle of Black Panther, not through cutscenes, but through choice, through mistakes, through managing a kingdom of competing interests, hidden enemies, and fragile loyalties. Players would have been able to explore sprawling Wakandan cities, take part in tribal ceremonies, encounter Skrulls interrupting royal duels, and more. The art leaked post-cancellation was proof enough. This world was coming to life. But you already know how this ends, and if you don't, buckle up. After 4 years in development, more than $40 million spent, and a team of 74 key developers, including many who had just relocated their entire lives to join the project, EA pulled the plug on the Black Panther game. And to ensure that it stayed dead, they shut down Cliffhanger Studios entirely. Officially, the decision was framed as a strategic realignment to sharpen focus and double down on EA's heavy hitters like Apex Legends, The Sims, and EA Sports FC. In reality, the game was caught in the crossfire of executive indecision, patent anxiety, and corporate cowardice. So let's explore the collapse further. According to Jason Schreier's reporting for Bloomberg, the project had actually passed an internal milestone, what EA calls a gate, a signal that production could move forward. Internally, Cliffhanger believed they had finally turned the corner. Hiring was active and tools were coming online, and the narrative systems, dynamic, paranoid, beautiful systems, were starting to work. But to the execs, the project looked like a time sink with too many moving parts. You see, Cliffhanger wasn't just developing a game, they were building an entire studio from scratch in Kirkland, Washington, a notoriously expensive tech hub. Salaries ballooned, overhead soared, and EA's mid-2025 return-to-office mandate only made things worse. Developers who could have been hired remotely had to live within commuting distance, where median rent topped $2,800 a month. And while 40% of the team had only just joined within the last year, some were laid off just weeks after signing on. Behind the scenes, legal complications dragged down development further. Cliffhanger's engineers were spending almost half their AI programming time designing workarounds for Warner Bros.' owned Nemesis system patent. And the final straw, Cliffhanger estimated they needed 18 more months and another $75 million to deliver a vertical slice, something investors could actually play and understand, but the innovation they were building didn't fit into a clean demo. The game wasn't about shiny explosions or cinematic QuickTime events. It was about subtlety, influence, betrayal, and consequence. And subtlety doesn't show up well on a slide deck. So EA killed it. No warning, just an email. The same week, over 85% of the team were quietly let go. Internal transfers? Well, barely 15%. The rest were out of work, many after giving up stable jobs to chase something bold. And just like that, years of innovation, leadership, and creative ambition were wiped off the roadmap. Not because it wasn't working, but because it didn't fit into a quarterly earnings call. And this is where things go from disappointing to infuriating, because the cancellation of Black Panther didn't just take out a promising Marvel title, it killed the most serious attempt in over a decade to revive one of the most innovative gameplay systems ever created, the already mentioned beloved Nemesis system. First introduced by Monolith Productions in Shadow of Mordor, the Nemesis system gave players enemies with grudges, personal evolving vendettas that made the open world feel alive. Foes would remember you, adapt and return with scars, new ranks and bitter dialogue. It was revolutionary, so naturally Warner Bros. Patented it. Not just the idea, but the whole structure, NPC hierarchies, promotion logics, vendetta systems, and memory-based behaviours, and then they sat on it like a dragon hoarding treasure. But the patent for this doesn't expire until 2036. Most studios gave up trying to touch it. The legal risk wasn't worth it, but Cliffhanger didn't. They brought in Monolith alumni, including Kevin Stevens himself, to build something new, legally distinct and functionally evolved. A reimagined Nemesis System 2.0 that didn't just track your enemies, it tracked everything. In this version, it wasn't about orc captains with names and scars. It was about the entire ecosystem of Wakanda remembering and reacting to you. Political factions, tribal councils, romantic subplots, Skrull infiltrators who didn't just shapeshift, they learned. Machine learning AI allowed enemies to study your playstyle. Favouring stealth, Skrulls would start using motion sensing drones. Going loud? Expect ambushes rigged with vibranium explosives. Instead of a rigid enemy hierarchy, Cliffhanger built what they called a reputation web. It would have tracked your influence across all social groups, who you helped, who you ignored, and who you betrayed. A Dora Milaje captain you brushed off hours ago might later sabotage a critical negotiation. Tribal leaders would have been able to withhold resources if you lost their trust. Even allies could become rivals depending on how you governed. And that wasn't just for flavour. It's said that the plan was that some Skrulls would have been able to impersonate key NPCs, hide as background characters, and even fabricate shared memories to earn your trust. One leaked system would have let a Skrull impersonate a longtime companion, only to turn on you during a royal succession trial. It was part stealth, part politics, part psychological warfare. But building that, it cost dearly. Nearly 40% of Cliffhanger's AI team was tied up in legal engineering, carefully tiptoeing around Warner Brothers' patent while still trying to innovate. They couldn't use traditional promotion mechanics. They couldn't automate vendettas. So they designed entirely new behavioural systems, all while praying EA executives understood what they were doing. And now, it's all gone. The original creators Monolith was shut down by Warner Brothers earlier this year. Their Wonder Woman game, the last known title to feature true Nemesis mechanics, was cancelled without ceremony. Cliffhanger's vision is now a closed case file, and 3 other Nemesis-inspired prototypes at other studios were reportedly shelved within weeks of EA's decision. So, here we are. The most interesting AI-driven storytelling system in gaming is now a hostage to paperwork, and the only studios that tried to bring it back were either gutted or ghosted. The patent still locked, the idea still brilliant, but the industry still too afraid to touch it. What an absolute farce. So let's be clear here, Cliffhanger didn't fail because they lacked talent. They didn't fail because the concept was too flawed. They failed because EA, like most of the AAA industry in 2025, has absolutely no idea what to do with creativity that doesn't come pre-approved by a focus group. This game was never meant to just be a superhero beat-em-up. It was a political thriller, a succession drama, a reactive ecosystem built on mistrust, betrayal, and emergent AI. It wasn't risky because it was bad, it was risky because it dared to be different, and in the current climate, that's a death sentence. Especially when other greedy publishers are predatorily patenting the broadest of ideas to intentionally slow down the creative process throughout the rest of the industry. AAA gaming is a complete mess. This year alone, EA has restructured 3 times, shuttering projects at Codemasters, laying off entire teams at BioWare, and now dissolving Cliffhanger Games altogether. Their public strategy has shifted firmly towards owned IPs like The Sims, Apex Legends, and Battlefield, franchises with built-in monetization systems and full revenue control. Licensed games like Marvel titles now face far greater scrutiny, not because they're less popular, but because they come with less margin, more profit sharing, more creative oversight, and worst of all, from a publisher's perspective, less control. EA's own CEO Andrew Wilson spent recent investor calls lavishing praise on EA Sports FC and College Football 25, safe bets with proven repeatable returns. Meanwhile, more experimental work like Black Panther quietly smothered It didn't promise a battle pass. It didn't have a loot funnel. It was, in their eyes, a gamble with no immediate payout. And that's the thing. The Black Panther game had the potential to be the definitive Wakanda experience. It could have stood shoulder to shoulder with Spider-Man or Guardians of the Galaxy, titles that succeeded precisely because their publishers gave them room to breathe. But Cliffhanger wasn't Insomniac. They were new, unproven, and worse, they were trying to push a system, the Nemesis 2.0, that didn't fit into any known marketing funnel, and that's without even mentioning patent concerns it faced. It needed time, iteration, long-term support. All things modern publishers avoid like the plague. Cliffhanger were crushed by the mediocrity of a system that punishes anything that isn't instantly profitable, so no. EA didn't just cancel a game, they buried a chance to evolve the single-player superhero genre into something deeper and bolder, something that didn't revolve around QTEs and collectible suits. They suffocated innovation and then spun it as a strategy. So with this game now cancelled, before we all crawl back into our vibranium-lined bunkers and declare the death of ambition, let's acknowledge EA hasn't completely abandoned Marvel. Not yet, anyway. As of now, the company is still working on other Marvel games. The most visible is the Iron Man title from Motive Studio, the team behind Star Wars Squadrons and the Dead Space remake. It's being built in Unreal Engine 5, features a dedicated single-player narrative, and crucially, is being developed out of infamous Montreal, a region with lower costs and a more established development pipeline. Then, there's still another unannounced Marvel game floating in the shadows. According to leaks, it centres around a lower-risk hero, likely Captain America or Ghost Rider, characters with fan bases but fewer gameplay complications. In other words, easier to market, easier to manage. And then, curiously, there's word of a second Black Panther game, allegedly in development at a completely different EA studio. But let's not pretend this is a spiritual continuation. If it exists, and that's still a big if, it's reportedly being designed around a more traditional structure, a linear narrative, a cinematic approach. Definitely no emergent diplomacy, procedural betrayal, or reimagined Nemesis system. Think QuickTime events, not coups. So yes, the Black Panther brand lives on, but not the version we were promised. Not the one Cliffhanger tried to build, a game designed to feature storytelling through systems, not bloated budget cutscenes, and that's gone now. Buried under 4 years of experimentation, millions of dollars in R&D, and a label on an internal EA spreadsheet. Too complicated to care about. So, what can we make of all of this? The lights may still be on in EA's Marvel department, but the spark, the real spark, the one that believed players could handle depth and consequence, is out. What's left is a safer, shallower version of superhero gaming, one that's easier to ship, easier to sell, easier to forget, and in the end, this isn't just about Black Panther, it's about what modern gaming refuses to be. Because the truth is, Cliffhanger's Black Panther wasn't cancelled for being bad. It was cancelled for being different, for daring to reach beyond the usual AAA checklist, for imagining a world where player choices carried real weight, where enemies didn't just respawn, they remembered, where betrayal wasn't a twist in a cutscene, but something you caused, something you earned, a game where the Black Panther mantle wasn't handed to you after a tutorial. It was fought for. But in 2025, that kind of ambition is radioactive. It doesn't plug cleanly into a quarterly revenue forecast and doesn't lend itself to a user acquisition funnel. It can't be broken into loot tiers or live ops schedules. It's too hard to pitch in 30 seconds, so it gets scrapped. And in its place, more of the same, recycled mechanics, safe sequels, metrics-approved mediocrity, all from the same publishers who claim to be baffled by declining player engagement. Maybe someday the Nemesis system will return, maybe once the patent expires, or maybe someone, somewhere, will decide that it's still worth fighting for, that players can handle complexity, that trust and betrayal have better game mechanics than colour-coded rarity drops. But until then, it's just another ghost. Another idea buried beneath the vibranium mines of what could have been. But always remember, even in a year this bleak, there are still glimmers of hope, because while EA mocks its own audience, dismissing RPG fans as cave-dwelling nerds, other developers are out there actually earning our time and money. Case in point, Expedition 33, the title that somehow outclassed the billion-dollar mediocrity of the AAA scene. And you can grab it right now with 43% off using my link below. And if you're feeling adventurous, there are discounts of up to 90% on thousands of other brilliant games too. So why pay premium prices for corporate contempt when you can support real artistry instead? And each purchase helps fund this channel. And if you want to support what I do in a more personal way, access my behind the scenes cosplay library and more over on Patreon. See you all soon.